So the first commandment gives us the object of our worship. The second commandment gives us the limitations of our worship. It would be one thing for God to say, I'm God, you must worship me. And then for us to say, excellent. Here's how we've determined that we're going to worship you. But God doesn't even leave that up to us. God doesn't even allow us to determine how we're going to worship him. Look at the second commandment. You shall not make for yourselves a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. In other words, we worship God the way God says he is to be worshiped. First of all, this obviously prohibits idolatry. Obviously, explicitly, this prohibits idolatry. You don't get to make something and offer it worship, even on my behalf, God says. You don't get to do that, okay? When we get to this commandment and spend a few weeks on this commandment, we'll talk about some of the implications of this and the way that this has been interpreted in Reformed circles, because there's not complete agreement on this. For example, there's disagreement even among Reformed Christians as to whether or not images of Jesus would violate the second commandment. Okay? There are those who would argue no images of Jesus at all because of violations of the second commandment. All right? And if you want to understand this culturally, then you would see, let me put two things before you. One would be the Jesus film, right? Which is shown all over the place, and here's a man playing Jesus, or if not the Jesus film, then the one where Jim Caviezel, The Passion of the Christ, okay? You look at those films, right? And you have Jesus being portrayed on film. But there's another. You remember Ben-Hur? Jesus is in Ben-Hur, but you don't see him. You get to see his cloak or his robe or whatever, but intentionally in Ben-Hur, Jesus is not personified. He's not shown, okay? So there would be a difference between those who believe that images of Jesus would be a violation of the second commandment and those who believe that because God manifested himself in flesh, that images of Jesus would not necessarily be a violation of the second commandment. But that's sort of inside baseball. What everybody agrees upon is that you don't make objects and worship them. So if Jim Caviezel is dressed up as Jesus, you don't bow down at his feet and offer him worship. Even if you believe it was appropriate to make the Passion of the Christ and have an image of Jesus in that film, even those people who would take that position would also agree that you would not, therefore, when he's in his costume and in his makeup playing the role, you would not bow down before him and offer him worship. That would clearly be idolatry. Fair enough? Okay. But regardless of how you split that hair, the fact of the matter is we do not offer our worship to anything or anyone but God.